Says it's preparing. All right. Well, here we are, Facebook world, and welcome to our latest edition of Kilt Talk. It's my turn this time to host the show that really was the brainchild of Dr. Goodwin and David Garrels, who are with us as always this week. And I thought about not wearing the kilt, but I decided to wear it because it couldn't be Kilt Talk without kilt. And since we're all working from home and it's technically a holiday, I was just going to wear my fat kid shorts all day long and just be comfortable. But I've decided to put the kilt on. So this week's edition of Kilt Talk, what I'd like to do is spend the half hour that we have talking about stories in which remind us, or not remind us, but bring us back to the classroom days. And we've heard these horror stories, and I talk about them in when I'm teaching freshman seminar courses, our IDST 1301, and I talk to freshmen about the things you hear about college professors that are true, and the things that are exaggerations, and the things in the middle. But we all have interesting stories from the classroom, whether it was as a faculty member and things that you've seen there, or as a student and things that you've seen, or just stories that you've heard from other students. So that's today's topic, stories from the classroom in Kilt Talk, focused on our experiences in college, both as faculty and as students. So the first question I have is, what is your favorite memory from going to class? And when I say this, thinking about, if you think back of all the college courses you took, what's one thing that happened in a college course that sort of always brings a smile to your face, or and along those lines? So what's one thing you remember from being a student that makes you happy in the classroom?
There's a story that I always share with the freshmen. Now, I guess people need to understand I'm alumni of Schreiner, so my experience when in the classroom is going to be Schreiner specific. So in this case, Dr. Shaw, I was taking his motor learning class, and I remember walking in the first day to that class, and he was laying on the ground, and we had no idea why he was laying on the ground. Our first task as a class, first day, was simply to tell him how to get up off the ground. What we didn't know was that he was going to do exactly to the T what we were going to say. So if you said, move your arm, he moved his arm in no particular pattern, right? And he was prepping us for our final, which was, again, trying to get him up off the ground. But by that point, throughout the class, we had learned the specific technological terms and things that we needed to say specifically to get him off of the ground, and not just have him lay on the ground waving his arms and kicking his legs at us.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's that's pretty interesting. I think my favorite one is I was my senior level course for psychology in my undergrad, and I took animal behavior was the course that I took. And just about every week could have been a candidate for the favorite class, but we had as a trainer come in with one of the canines from the canine unit there in town, and he was talking to us about German Shepherds and why they use German Shepherds for like drug dogs or bomb dogs, attack dogs, those types of things, and not like dogs that are considered smarter like that, like a golden retriever or something like that. So that was super cool. And then we didn't know this, but then the trainer brought the dog in, and it was like a purebred German Shepherd, which they're massive dogs. There's like American German Shepherd. It's a little bit, it's a big dog, but this dog is really big. And they let us put the bite suit on, and the dog would attack our arm with that bite suit on. And man, the power of the animal is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so when I see that now on TV or a movie and see somebody get, attacked by one of those dogs, like, oh, because I know what that feels like, how strong they are. So that was probably my favorite experience in the classroom.
Wow. mine, I had a physics professor in college who he was he was such a gregarious and just fun person, and he had this long name. And anyway, he looked like Mario from Mario and Luigi. He had that real short, stocky build and a very big, bushy brown mustache. And but you could just tell this guy loved science. And he made so this was physics lecture, but the way he taught it was like physics lab. And two stories that I think of when I think of this class, and this gives you a good example. One day, we were talking about different gases, and so he comes in and he has these two different tanks, and he pulls in a lung full of helium, and he begins talking. And we've done that, we've been there, we've seen helium. But then I believe, and I may be getting this wrong, so if any of our physics folks or science folks are watching, please forgive me, as my degree is in psychology and not physics. But I think it was beryllium, and he sucked in a lung full of beryllium, which does the opposite of helium. And he began lecturing in that. But then he immediately had to stand on his head. And for the next 30 minutes, he had to give the rest of the lecture upside down. And as we watched, and he explained that the only way because beryllium's a heavier gas, the only way for him to expel it from his lungs safely without dying, which the risk of inhaling beryllium was that you could die, was for him to stand on his head and expel it as he spoke. That was one example, but my favorite example from this class was one day he came in and he had this box on the desk and on his so it was a lecture style room where we had road seating, and he had this big box on the desk on the front table that he was lecturing from, and he flipped all the lights out. What we didn't realize that he had set up black lights all around the room, and he flipped a switch and turned the black lights on. And then he opened the box, and inside the box was thousands upon thousands of glow in the dark bouncy balls. And he just started throwing them all over the room. And you couldn't see anything in the room, but unless it reflected black light. So if you were wearing a white t-shirt or anything, but these balls were going everywhere. And the whole time he's trying to get our attention and lecture to us about fluorescent light and the reflection of light. But he was having so much fun, he lost track of what he was trying to say. And it was one of those things that this guy he wanted to play with us. And I really enjoyed that style of lecture. It really matches. People complained about him a lot to administration that they weren't learning anything in his class because they couldn't pay attention. He's constantly distracting. I loved it. It was my favorite physics class. One of my favorite classes of all time. This guy was just a fun dude. So the next question that I have is similar to that. What's a story that you have or can share of a bad experience in a classroom?
That's a really tough one.
It's a good thing that we're having think really hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the worst, I guess I had a professor that I couldn't understand him. And I don't mean like I couldn't understand the level of what he was teaching, but I couldn't physically understand the teacher. And he was it was a geology course. It was geology 2. And I was in the classroom, and the way he lectures, he's from Germany. And so he's super strong German accent. And when he was teach though, he's writing on the chalkboard, right? This is before we had, smart boards and all that kind of cool stuff. So he's writing on the chalkboard and he's mumbling to the board, so no one can hear him what he's saying. And I'm in like the second row, so it's not that big of a space. And he's talking, and so you're trying to follow, but you can't read his handwriting either. So you're trying not to fall asleep in the class, right? And then all of a sudden he'll turn around and he'll talk really loud. And so they'll be like, and then the plagioclase, as it's part of it. And you're like, oh my God. And so I didn't do very well in that class as we couldn't understand him. And so when he would go to office hours, you still couldn't understand through his accent was so thick.
Yeah.
I think I only took him that one semester. That's the worst thing I could think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine's probably more relative to me. Like I never had like a bad experience like with a professor. It was more of like the class and the content of me just not being able to wrap my head around it. I took a I attempted to take an aesthetic appreciation course in music, which, cool, awesome, get excited about that. But I didn't realize was it wasn't the music in the way that I was thinking music. So it was like learning the instrument specific, like the type of instrument from like other countries, like the specific instrument to maybe like India, things like and this is the extent of my knowledge of it, right? Still, because I couldn't tell you the different instruments from around the world specifically to the countries. I remember being in that class and being so miserable because it was like the lecture was, here's this instrument, play, and then it was like just the music, right? And that was it. For whatever reason, I had the hardest time trying to wrap my head around the concept of distinguishing between, I guess, the notes of the different instruments, which in my mind and in my ears sounded exactly the same.
Yeah.
Pretty sure the first test I might have gotten a 6, maybe out of 100 points. So um, that's probably one of I think it was maybe the only class I had to drop. Um, I ended up having to drop that class. It was like a no-brainer for me. Like there was no way I was even going to try to attempt to suffer through that after the
Yeah.
first attempt of that test. So, but again, not the professor of the class. It was just my inability to wrap my head around the content. I just couldn't do it.
Mine, I had a faculty member who years ago, I decided to take a business class because I was really interested in it, just wanted to kind of see what it was like. And this guy, I don't want to give his name. He retired. This was his last semester to teach. And so everybody knew he was retiring. And I mean, he had given up, it felt like. And so, but I had taken him and I didn't know before because I didn't know any of the business faculty. It wasn't my major, but I took this class and I got in there and people said, hey, you can pass this class. It's an easy class. And that's not why I took it, but it definitely didn't dissuade me from taking it. He would sit at the front of the room at a desk or behind a table. And he would open the textbook that we were using for the class and he would read to us like reading corner, and he would say, okay, follow along. And that was the class. So this was a college class in which I sat down and a faculty member read from the book. So the fourth day of this, so this was the second week, it was a Tuesday, Thursday class. At the end of the second week, I interrupted him, and this is just my style because I was this kind of college student. And I asked him, I said, hey, Dr. So-and-so, are you going to read to us every day? And he said, yes, I'm going to make sure that you get this information, this important stuff. And I said, do we need to come? I mean, you take roll, but do we need to be here for this? Because I can read on my own. And he said, are you saying that my lectures aren't good enough for you? And I said, well, honestly, if everybody teaches this way, libraries can hand out degrees. And he got so mad at me. He said, how dare you? And he's like stood up and like walked around the class and got sort of indignant about it and just flustered. And I said, hey man, I'm not, I'm just saying that you're teaching or you're supposed to be teaching and we're paying for this course and all you're doing is reading to us. And the rest of the class got mad at me. They're like, shut up, dude. He takes the tests from the book. This is an easy A. All you got to do is shut up. And I don't know, I was just that kind of student. So that was the worst in class experience. He hated my guts after that. He did not he couldn't, because his tests were multiple choice and he took them all from the book. He couldn't find a way to fail me, but I'm pretty sure he wanted to. But he was also retiring, so it was just a weird experience in the classroom with him having to do that. So, what's one of the craziest stories that you can remember or that you've heard from a classroom?
Hmm.
I don't know. Most of my class has been just decently normal. So crazy. That's tough.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that was just completely out there, crazy stuff. Um, I mean, small things come to mind, like running across the quad because you overslept and you have 3 minutes to get to class, and you know that if you don't make it, the door is going to be locked. Right? That was we don't do that anymore. So this, as far as I know, but
Yeah.
when I was a student, like if you didn't make it on time, like for me, many of my classes, the door was locked and you weren't getting in. Like it was, you need to be on time. Yes, I remember one time getting there right as the moment the door was being shut and being able to wedge my foot between the door and the door jamb and being able to get in just right there in that moment. Um, but then other crazy stuff, students uh, sneaking alcohol into class, using you know, the 44-ounce drinks or whatever, things like that. You always hear about stories of people claiming to be able to do that or bragging about that later and stuff like that. Outside of that, not anything too crazy.
Yeah. My I have this, I tell this story to my classes. It's a funny story, and absolutely true. So one of my very first college courses that I took was a history class. And again, one of this history teacher was kind of a little guy, maybe an inch shorter than I am, and I'm not very tall, and definitely much thinner. And so he was just an interesting personality. He came in the very first day of class. So we were sitting there in a lecture hall of about 70 people, maybe 80. It was a pretty big space in this classroom. And he came in wearing a suit and a tie, and the class started at 9, and we were all sitting there. It's first day of class, so everybody gets there a little early. You're kind of nervous, excited, bunch of freshmen. We're all sitting there, and in walks this dude right at 9 o'clock. And he just begins lecturing. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't say anything. And he starts writing on the board. And he's going a million miles an hour. And we're like, oh crap. And we all are like scrambling to get our notes. We've got these little desks because it's a lecture hall. So it was one of those lecture halls that had like and that had the little desk that like pops up next to you and folds over. And so you have these like auditorium style seating. So you don't have much space, and you're like scrambling to get notebooks out, and everybody's trying to take notes. Can't keep up with him because the speed in which he's writing and talking is mind blowing. And he fills up the entire front of the room's board. And it seemed, and I don't know if I'm exaggerating this in my brain over time, it seemed so choreographed. He gets to the end of the board, or no, about halfway through the board. Sorry. He gets halfway through the board, and all of a sudden 6 or 7 teaching assistants come in with a syllabus that is nearly a quarter-inch thick, stapled papers, and just starts putting them down on our desk. And we're trying to take notes, and they're throwing these syllabus down on our desk, and we're going crazy. And then the guy does something that to this day, I can't figure out how he did it. While he was lecturing, he turns and he writes behind him, and he looks at us and keeps talking and writes out an entire sentence like over his shoulder like this, and then continues like he was checking on us. And then he fills up the board, and he goes, and there's another chalkboard on the other side. He fills, and with 2 minutes left in the 55-minute class, he looks down at his watch and he says, "That'll do." And I don't know that that's exactly, but he made some sort of comment that says, "Yep, okay, perfect," and leaves. And we're all just sitting there staring at each other going, what the hell just happened? Is this how college is going to be? And so the next day, so this was, I think, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. The next Wednesday, we come to class, and as predicted, of the 70 or 80 people that were there the first day, only half of us stayed. Everybody else dropped the class. And the guy comes back in. He comes in early this time, so he's 5 minutes early. He's wearing like a Hawaiian shirt and some like cargo shorts and flip-flops. And he sits down at the front of the classroom and he says, "Hey, what do you guys want to talk about?" And we look at him and said, "What?" who's the guy that came the other week? And he goes into this whole spill about how he loves to scare freshmen, and he knew that that would scare us. And he also knew that if we weren't serious about taking the class, we would drop. And he said, so it looks like the serious folks are still here. Let's get down to history. And somebody asked, what do we do with the notes we took last week? And he goes, hey, look, keep them, don't keep them. That's the entire semester's worth of notes. So I'm going to redo all of that, but we're going to talk more in depth about this. So keep it. It's valuable. I don't want to waste anybody's time, but at the same point, we're going to redo all of that. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. We'll cover it. We're going to get back and we do this. And we ended up, and the only question I asked the whole class was, hey, that whole behind the back thing, how'd you do that? He goes, oh, I practice and practice and practice. I sit in a mirror and I only know those 3 words. I only know how to write out those 3 words. And he goes, I do it just to freak with people, just to freak them out. And it was such and he ended up being a really good faculty member, and we had a lot of fun. But that was such a cool story. You hear those stories about professors who sort of play games with students in that way. And I just remember this guy. We're still Facebook friends, and I still ask him, do you continue to do this to freshmen? He's like, well, I got in trouble a few years ago, and somebody said that I was scaring people, and anyway, but I still try to do it. And it's great. And he goes, I don't have 6 TAs anymore. I only got 1 person. So it's hard to really disrupt the class with 1 person passing out syllabus. The whole throwing the syllabus on our desk was all planned, and it was all just to frustrate us. It was so funny.
Man, I don't have anything that cool. I mean, I think the craziest thing I ever heard in a classroom was it was my first class for my master's degree in counseling, and our professor, I go and sit in the class, and she said, she was super cool, but she said, all right, so this is your first course. This is Intro to Counseling, and you only have 2 grades in this whole class. And first was a test, a paper that we had to write over our own theory of counseling. She said, you can't get it wrong because it's your opinion. So you're going to get 100 on that one. No problem. Then you're going to take a final. It's going to, and your final is going to be take home, open note, open book, multiple choice, final. And we were like, this is supposed to be the master's degree. It's supposed to be tough, right? She said, and she basically explained it like, this whole degree, your grades don't mean a whole lot because you could either perform the skills of a counselor or you can't. And that's it. Grades are formality. And that was the craziest thing I ever heard in class. So the rest of my couple of years, all I had to do was be able to, like that there was tests there, but that's not what they focused on. They focused on, did I have the skills to sit down and build rapport with a client and know how to talk them through all those things. And so for someone to sit there and tell you your grades don't matter a whole lot and all your tests are going to be easy, was just kind of radical after, that being my first class in grad school.
Yeah.
But it set the tone and it allowed us to be more comfortable with the rest of the course and focus more on the skills that we had to develop rather than studying, all night for tests. That was the craziest thing I could think of.
Dr. Huber, you reminded me of, I wasn't able to do this. I wish I had. And I'm going to call him out because he's a friend of mine, but Dr. Miller, when he first started teaching at Schreiner, I remember him telling me one of his first classes, because he just got there. People don't really know who he was. This is years ago. So he sat down as a student in his own class before people arrived, right? And just waited, right? And sat there and kind of felt the tension rise, and he's kind of in a way egging it on, looking around, like, where is this guy? And and then stands up, turns around, like, oh, I'm hello, I'm Dr. Miller, and we're gonna be, I think it was chemistry or something like that. Like, oh, we'll be doing, and started his lecture that way. So he pretended to be a student at the start of his class, and I remember thinking, man, such a good idea. I wish I had done that. I can't do it now. Everybody knows who you are, but
Yeah.
in that moment, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, those are great stories. I actually, Ryan Horn, a former student of mine, we set up when I taught a freshman seminar class years ago. I have this whole thing about wearing shirts from other universities, and it's been, sort of a pet peeve of mine for a very long time. And So we had Ryan, who was a student, but he was a senior or maybe a junior at the college. He and I were friends, and I was teaching, I think, my first or second ever course at the college, and I had him come to the class and pretend to be a student, and then I was the faculty, and I came in and said something because we had him wearing an A&M shirt, and I wasn't at A&M, and had him wearing an A&M shirt. I called him out, and he got mad, and he threw books, and he's like, this is stupid. And he tears the shirt off in the middle of class, and he goes, you're the dumbest person. And like, we got into it, and he walks out, and the students are just going, what just happened? And it's all these freshmen, and I'm their faculty member who just fought with a student. And I said, you guys, because I love this place, and I'm gonna stand up for everything, and we got into this whole thing about it. And one of the girls started to nearly tear up. She, people just don't like controversy. And that's when I realized I totally messed up. I shouldn't have gone this far with it. I went way too far. And I called Ryan. I said, oh, wait, Ryan's in the hallway. And we staged the whole thing. We told the class that was part of our thing. And everybody laughed, and it ended up being a lot of fun. But man, the moment, like, to see two people fighting like that, and then to see a girl like tears in her eyes because she's so scared, made me really rethink that moment of having a fake student. And so anyway, I know we're coming up on our half hour here. I want to ask, and this could be a two-part question. One, your favorite teacher that you ever had in college, and why? And if you had any pivotal moments. So I had two questions left, but I got excited about all these stories. So favorite teacher in college, and why? And then any pivotal moment that really, that sort of Dead Poet Society moment where you realize, or was there a moment in college that sort of changed your trajectory? So favorite faculty and pivotal moment, 2 in 1.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go with that one. So the pivotal moment thing, I guess, for me was research methodology course in psychology. Because what I wanted to do with my psychology degree was to help other people, right? And so that's what I went into it for. And after taking research methods and understanding that psychology was a lot more scientific than I thought it was really going to be at that point, because and I'd be doing a lot more lab work and things like that, or prescribing drugs and things like that to help. I was like, oh, this is not really going to be what I want to do. But I already had so many other classes that I had taken in psychology that I thought was fun, like human sexuality was a crazy class. Psychopath in film was a class that we took. Abnormal behavior, those were all great. And I realized at that point I didn't want to use like chemical fix for someone who was struggling with an issue. And so that's what made me decide to go into counseling later, which introduces my favorite professor, which is Dr. Tom Caffrey. Man, he was so much fun, and he understood, I guess, what it was like to be a grad student, because we were working all day and then coming to class at night. And so one of the first things he'd make sure he did in all of his classes was set up who was going to bring food on what class days. That's part of the syllabus. All right, who's bringing the food this time? And we all shared it, so we could all have dinner and have a meal. And he's Cajun, right? So and so he would bring like gumbo and jambalaya and all that kind of stuff. It's so great. But what was also made him fun is he was a down to earth guy, and you could just talk to him. So I spent a lot of my pre-class time just in his office, and we're talking about the Saints or the coolest thing on the internet at that time, or movies or whatever. And he made it, I guess he kind of shaped the way I wanted to be as someone who was going to be working in higher education, someone who's approachable easily, who's just a regular person who happens to have this job and it has is blessed to be able to lead others. And so, and he's, he jumped in on a couple of our videos already, watching some of the stuff we're doing. So still a good friend. Every time I get to go to Louisiana, he makes sure that I stop by and come see him up there at his campus. And so that's my favorite guy in my transitional story.
Cool.
For me, it'd be Dr. Barry Shaw. So as an undergrad, I was an exercise science major and spent, once you get to those upper level classes, I'm pretty sure I spent every day, in one of the classes he was teaching. And so ended up spending a lot of time with him, in classes. And um, I really came to appreciate how he approached the class. It was more conversation. There's topics and presentations, but you could really there's really that just connection with him in the class, of everyone in there because of just the conversation. He came in with something to draw out a conversation with the students, which I came to really appreciate. But there's a few different interactions that I had with him where he started to help give me confidence that was in the right, at least major, right? Because it was an interest that I had and I had the knowledge and I was able to start putting the pieces together. And, even at the time, not thinking out ahead, he was already, thinking out ahead for me. I remember a brief conversation with him, where, um, the idea of teaching or presenting or something in the related field, kind of what I'm doing today was, he basically was like, hey, you'd be good at this. You should kind of, consider, thinking about this and, kind of reflecting a little bit back, of how I approach, my classes and how I'm teaching and interacting with students now is very similar to the way I remember the interactions for him. So, he's had a pretty big impact now reflecting back on kind of how I've been able to move forward and think along the ways of interacting with students and people. The other one happened in my doctoral program. I'm a bit of an introvert. I'm going to go to class. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to take my notes. I'm going to interact. Kind of as I needed to, right? And at the time, the program required me to also travel multiple weekends to Denver, Colorado. Um, so if y'all watched the previous episode yesterday, you understand that I'm already stressed out
Yeah.
because of the travel piece. So, I get there, we're sitting in class, and it's a whole, it's a weekend thing. It's an 8 hour, they knock out a lot of stuff in 2 days. And after the first day sessions, the professor at the time comes, kind of pulls me over. He's like, when you speak, you have a lot of good things to say. You should probably do that more often. It was a very just quick interaction, but just knowing that he acknowledged me in that way gave me some more sense of confidence in, I do understand what's going on. I understand the concepts, and apparently, at least he thinks, right, that I have a good contribution to make to the conversation, and that I should probably do it more often. For me, that was the pivotal point where I realized that if I'm going to be involved or engaged in something or be invited to something, there's a reason behind that, and it's not just to sit there. So I really kind of took that moment to heart, not just in the classroom, but moving forward and trying to continue to learn how to navigate how to add to or bring my thought into conversations and things like that. So those are my two.
Yeah. So, man, hearing these stories, it makes me really appreciate the impact that people have in your life. And so, we were talking on the travel episode last night about why I like to travel. And one of the things that struck me, and one of the reasons I like this topic is because not nostalgic. I mean, there's a reason the three of us all work at a university is I remember walking across campus thinking I never want to leave, and I haven't. I've never left college. I've been in college almost, I mean, all of my adult life for sure, and it's been quite an adventure. I've shared in a lot of different experiences and things with you guys and students over the past 20 years that have really made this life a fulfilling and enriched one. So if I think back to my time in the classroom as a student, I'll start with this story that changed. Dr. Jim Towns taught a interpersonal communication class in which he intentionally limited to 10 people or less. And we were sitting in that class, and he asked us this question. And this question is a question I've posed to students ever since, any chance I get. A group of people or students, if I'm sitting with them, it's as if I want them to have this moment too. And if I can facilitate that in even remotely the same way that he did, it would be worth it. But he asked, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? Now, and then he prompted that and sort of explained further, something you love to do so much that you don't care whether you're getting paid for it or not. You would do it for free. What do you love to do? And then, he followed up with several questions, but the basic premise of it was, how do you become good enough at that so that someone else will pay you to do it? And if you can master that formula, find something you love to do so much that it doesn't matter whether you get paid, and then find a way to get paid at that, then you've sort of, in his opinion, and I share in this opinion, you found the secret to happiness and the secret to a happy life. And, I remember there was a guy in the class, his was like fishing, and he was a business major. And Dr. Towns challenged him. He said, why in the hell are you majoring in business when your greatest passion in life is fishing? This doesn't make any sense unless you're going to open up a bait and tackle shop somewhere, and the guy was like, I hadn't thought about that. And he left the room and changed his major to wildlife management. And he's a game warden now. And his primary job is patrolling Lake Sam Rayburn, the largest lake in Texas. And he fishes all day long. And he works with the science behind it. And he found a way to make a career out of his passion. And so that was a pivotal moment for me in my story in college, because I hadn't thought about that. Before that, I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to find a way to make money and pay bills. And that was my only goal. Happiness had no thought. And so that was my moment. My favorite faculty member does come much later. And it's weird because in the moment she wasn't. So it was my doctoral program too, Matt. And I remember Dr. Joyce Scott was my advisor. She was the worst. And I hated every minute because she challenged me and pushed me. She made me feel so dumb. And not in a mean way, but she would just send papers back to me. My dissertation, so you go through, like, she would label them. This is version A, B, C, D. We got through A2. So that means we went through the alphabet one time, then we went through the alphabet again, A1, B1, C. Then we went back and made it all the way to A2 before she said, okay, this is good enough to give to the committee. Like, that many revisions. I mean, it had to be 60 different versions plus of one dissertation. And she basically told me that I wasn't a good writer, that I needed to study more, and every step of the way. And when I finally graduated, she said it was worth it, right? And oh man, I'd never felt like so accomplished in my life to have somebody challenge me in that way and push me. And it wasn't until I had finished that I could look back and see exactly what she was doing and why she was doing it, to prepare me to be to get through that process. It's like, that reverse look at a parent. In the moment, I hated her so much, and she gave me the only B I had in the program. I had all A's in every one of my classes, and she gave me a B, and it made me so mad. And I was like, why am I getting a B in this class? I'm doing so well. She said, you're not understanding the concepts. And I thought, wow, I'm the smartest person in the room, but I wasn't. And she reminded me of that constantly and humbled me in a good way. And so she was Dr. Joyce Scott. She had her degree in French literature from Duke. And so she was just one of those genius people. Had served as a provost, I think, at Texas A&M. She was just an amazing individual, but definitely pushed me. And so I really appreciated her for that. And she put in a lot of time. I mean, to read my dissertation that many times and correct it and work with me and take midnight phone calls with me and settle me down, she really, really did earn a lot of respect from me. So that was my favorite moment with Dr. Towns, my favorite faculty member. Anything else before we close this off, guys?
Not really. I wish, that next time we'll be on air. We'll be on Monday, right? So we'll see you guys Monday. That's
What's
about
our
it.
topic Monday?
Oh goodness, let me see. I haven't pulled
Say
up.
what's Monday's date? All the days are the same right now.
Yeah, I don't even know what day of the week it is half the time in this quarantine situation.
Yeah. All right. So that's the 13th. So that's going to be Dr. Goodwin hosting Sports Talk.
Oh yeah, that's the
All right,
sports talk. Yeah, we got
with
2 alumni coming, Mason Wilkes and Miguel Hopkins, to just talk about sports. So I look forward to that. Not necessarily their careers, but just sports in general. We don't get to watch sports right now, so we can share in our passions. I think we got a good mix of multiple different sports that we can talk about with this group. So
yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and thanks to everyone who's watching on Facebook or YouTube. Catch us every day for our regular program, 6 o'clock, except for Fridays where we do Kilt Talk and switch it up a little at 10 a.m. Later, guys.